Hello. This is the next re-recorded solution video. This is, I think, third to last that I have to do. Uh, I took a bit of a couple days off from re-recording these because I was really busy with some classwork for a couple days, but I'm good with that now. So, next up we have Sorry That Sum is Taken. I would go on the record and say this is probably my favorite puzzle I've made so far. The message here alludes to that. At that point, it was still new, so I really hadn't had enough time to let it set in and see people solve it, and me go back to it and see if it still holds up with kind of the test of time. I think it does. I think this is definitely the most elegant one I've put out so far. As you can see, it was originally a gift in a Secret Santa event for fellow setter Sudoku. Definitely recommend you check his puzzles out. He's very good. Um, me and him may collaborate on some future puzzles as well. We've talked about that recently, so keep an eye out for that as well. So I posted this as a standalone puzzle release now, so it's just here. Let's open it up here. So we have what would seem like normal rules at first, but this is definitely a bit unique. So we first have normal Sudoku rules as usual, so we have 1 to 9 in each of the rows, columns, and boxes. Next up, we have killer cages, and you'll already see there's some issues here. The fact that we don't know most of the totals. So it says digits in dotted line cages must sum to the number in the top left corner of the cage. Big emphasis on if given. As you can see, the only one in the grid that's actually given is this cage summing to 8. In this puzzle, some totals are entirely ambiguous, and some are given as strict inequalities. For example, a cage that says this little angled symbol 35, that's the sign for greater than. In its top left, then that would mean it has a sum higher than 35 and not 35 itself. And so this is 8, that's greater than 12, less than 19, greater than 10, greater than 12, greater than 14. Then we have a couple that don't have any totals. I will leave that as an exercise for you to figure out kind of what possible purpose could these have. That'll come up a bit later. Region sum lines, box borders split blue lines into segments. So usually we can kind of indicate this with some coloring. So we have this blue line, it crosses into different boxes of the grid, and every time it does, we kind of split it into a different chunk. So we have 2 cells in green, 5 in pink, 2 in orange. And it's saying that the digits on those sections must sum to the same value. So if we determine this little bit sum to 15, then these 5 would have to sum to 15, and these 2 in orange would also have to sum to 15. Next, we have sum uniqueness. Each sum can appear at most once in the puzzle. This rule applies to killer cages and region sum lines. For example, if a region sum line is determined to have its segments sum to 6, no other line can do the same, and no cages may sum to 6. So, that same example. If we determine that this one summed to 15, and these sum to 15, and that sums to 15, then we would know that none of the other cages or other lines can sum to 15. These already couldn't because they're single digits. But let's say, for example, this cage, less than 19. It would be impossible for that to also be 15 then. And then last, we have crock-p pairs. Digits separated by a black dot must have one digit be double the other. So we have one of those up here. And then digits separated by a white dot must be consecutive, and that's these down here. So these would be consecutive digits summing to something greater than 13. And with that, those are the rules. You can see the sum uniqueness is my own creation for this here. Part of why I really liked this puzzle is that I was really in over my head. That was a cool idea, but I had no idea how to even go about making that useful. And I basically just kind of drew stuff into the grid until I got the hang of kind of how that could be useful. So let's take a start at this. Now, I have provided 5 hints on Logic Masters here. So, the first one is relevant pretty early on. Hint number 1 says, 2-cell cages must have a maximum sum of 17. 5-cell region sum lines have a minimum sum of 15. These facts are very important for the break-in. And so let's process that one bit at a time. 2-cell cages have a maximum sum of 17. So if we went over to this cage, saying greater than 10, we don't know what it is, but it's going to have an upper bounds of 17, because the biggest number you can make in 2 digits is 8 and 9, summing to 17. So, that already puts some bounds on this. The more interesting ones are the ones that are closer to 17 already, like this one. That is greater than 14. So this cage must be 15, 16, or 17. Now, you could use Notepad to keep track of all this. I'm going to use the Carol calculator over here and say that this can only be 15, 16, or 17. We'll do it that way. This one's going to be the same. In Now the other part of the hint says 5-cell region sum lines have a minimum sum of 15. So we have kind of an interesting thing here. So it's both minimized and maximized when you kind of think of this line here, because this portion here has to sum to at least 15, because that's just what you get if you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this. If you then go to the other portion here, we have 2 cells. Now these are effectively cages. We don't know what the total is, it's even more ambiguous than these, but we are given some bounds because whatever these 2 sum to has to be the same as these 5. So if these are at least 15, then we can say these 2 must also be at least 15, which would be including 15 as an option. So that's an inclusive when we say minimum, or at least 15. So what we can say out of that is that this must be 15, 16, or 17, that must be 15, 16, 17, and that must be 15, 16, 17. Now, whatever it is for this line, it's going to be the same for all 3. But the interesting part of that is that gives us 3 different things in the grid that all must be 15, 16, or 17. We have this line, this cage here, and that cage here. So, that's now a pretty interesting revelation, because that means we have 3 different things that are one of those 3 options. So now nothing else in the grid is able to be able to sum to 15, 16, or 17. I kind of overspoke a little bit, but that's what hint 2 addresses. Hint 2 says, once you've identified a few sums via hint 1, follow it up by checking the other cage totals. Knowing they can't include the first few sums you identified makes them more restricted. Do this enough and you'll eventually have enough info in column 1 to work out the region sum line. So the power of hint 2 is mostly if you can't recognize that part, but it also is hinting you that column 1 is going to help us. So, not quite ready to go to that yet. But we do know 15, 16, 17 are ruled out from a couple things now. So we can go up to this and do the opposite. Instead of marking them green, mark them red. So that can't be any of those. That can't be any of those. The 12 cage here can't be. Or, sorry, the greater than 12 cage can't be. This less than 19 also can't be. 15, 16, or 17. But it also can't be, it has to be less than 19. So we actually know that this sums to 18 now, because it can't be 15, 16, 17, and it has to be less than 19. So we can mark that as green. And then this just is an 8 cage outright, so we can just put the digits in for that right away. We have mistyping, 172635. If you're getting used to these numbers, I was taught a decent trick the other day that different YouTuber in the community uses this, and I like the way it works, is if you take an even number cage like this, 8, and divide it in half, we get 4 and 4. Now we can't have 4 and 4 in a cage, so we have to take one side of that half and decrease it by 1, and the other to increase it by 1, so that way you have something a little below 8 and a little greater than 8. And so that gives us 3, 5. And if you do that again, do another decreasing and increasing, we get 2 and 6. And then we get 1 and 7. And so that's one mental math trick to figuring it out for even number cages. Okay, so let's continue looking at the cage totals. So this is going to be our next interesting one. Or either this and this up here, greater than 12. Because think of what these could be. If we're looking at things that are greater than 12, and they can't be 15, 16, 17, then they're going to have to be 13 or 14. And as soon as we know they're at least 13 or 14, this white dot becomes very powerful. And there's sort of 2 ways to think about it. You could just iterate through the options. 1 and 2 gives you 3, that's not big enough, and you can kind of go through the options that way. And you would find that 6, 7 is the only one that actually works to fit in this cage, because it's the only option that is consecutive digits, 6 and 7. Another way you can think about it that I've also found recently as a little trick is that white dots have to have an even and an odd number in it. And again, you can only find one combination of an even with an odd that are consecutive that end up summing to at least 13. So we get 6 and 7 for sure. That means this is the 13 cage down here, which means this one now can't be 13. Or, sorry, that's the wrong one. That means this one is 14. So we know this is 6, 7. We know this is 5, 9, or 6, 8. So before we look at what that does to the rest of the grid, we can now take out 13 and 14 from a couple of what other cages do we have left. We have this one here. So that now can't be 13. It can't be 14. It has to be greater than 10. So it's either 11 or 12. The only thing I don't like with the killer calculator is you have to keep clicking this thing to toggle between modes like that if you want to just filter it out. Okay, so now we can use some Sudoku tricks. So we have 6 and 7 are taken out, so this cannot be 1, 7, or 2, 6. That must be 3, 5. And so this is now where that second portion of hint 2 comes in, hinting us about column 1. So what power does 3, 5, 6, 7 in the column have? Well, it means that this can't be 3, 5, 6, 7. So if we think about what the minimum this line could be, we're already looking at it as minimum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's no longer possible to have a 5 on this, because we have a 5 in the column and you can't put a 5 on the black dot. So if we try to minimize this, we get 1, 2, 4, and then you'd end up having a 3 and a 6 over here. And so the question you can ask is, is this forced, or does it have to be, could it be maybe some degree of freedom here? Well, if we have 1, 2, 4, that sums to 7. 6, 3, and 6 sums to 9, so that gives us a sum of 16 here. And the only way to avoid having the sum to 16 is if you increase one of these numbers by 1. Now, if you increase either of these by 1, you either end up having a 7 on a black dot, which doesn't work, or a 4 on a black dot, which doesn't work with this. And if you increase any of these by 1, you clash with this info. 1 or 2 can't go up to 2 or 3, because we already have a 2, and then we have a 3 in the column. And 4 can't become a 5 then, because there's a 5 in the column. So, long story short, this must be exactly this. 1, 2, 4, 3, 6, summing 2. That's 9 and 7 it was? Yeah, 9 and 7. So that means these two are 9 and 7, in order to have that be an equal balance. And it tells us that this region sum line is 16. So now these two cannot be 16 anymore. Neither can these, but we already knew that. So, making some good progress now. So now we can think a little further. We have this column is also still interesting. We're missing an 8 and a 9. And now this can't be 9. So that must be 8. That must be 9. So now we know a little more about these than we realize. One of these is going to have to sum 17. And whichever one sums to 17 has to be 8 and 9 exactly. This can no longer be 9 because we have a 9 in the row. So this one has to be the one summing to 17 using 8 and 9. And this one has to be 15, which is either 6, 9, or 7, 8, and it can't be 9. So this is 7, 8. So that's about all we can do with classic Sudoku on sort of thinking about what's going on with these cages. But we now know a lot more about this. So we have a 3, 6 in the row. This can no longer be 6, 8. And now this 5, 9, 3, 6 over here is putting a lot of pressure on this 10 cage, greater than 10 cage, because we also have a 7, 9 here. So there's a lot of things this can no longer be. Can't have a 7 on it. You can't have a 5 on it. Can't have a 9 on it. And you can't have a 3 on it. And so what we see is the only option of numbers that works to sum to anything greater than 10 here is it has to be exactly 4, 8, summing to 12. Now we know this is 4, 8 now, so this can no longer be a 4. And now similar to how we had a lot of info in the column, this row is also starting to get pretty limited on what's left in it. These have to be 1, 2, and 7. This can't be a 7 because we have a 7, 9 here. So that gives us a 1, 2 pair, meaning that's 7 in the corner over here. Unfortunately, not a 3. But... And so that is the end of, we would say, phase 1 of the puzzle. So there's a pretty good chance you might get stuck at this point, because this was as far as I had designed the break-in, and then even I was like, what do I do now? You know, what do I add to the grid to make this work? Now, a lot of these clues weren't there yet, of course, but this is where hint 3 nudges you. Hint 3 says, what purpose could row 1, column 9, being in a single cell cage, have for the puzzle? Where can that digit go in box 5? So, we already could say a little bit about 7 in box 5. It can't go in here, just by Sudoku with these here. So 7 is somewhere here. And now the power of this being a single cell cage means you cannot repeat that not only within other cages, you can't have another single cell cage summing to 7, you also can't have any region sum lines have their segments sum to 7. These 3 cells here are parts of region sum lines that are single segments. So 7 cannot go on this. 7 must go in the center. And that now tells us the order of these cages here. So we have that worked out now. So, that now is going to help us with a little bit here. So, we knew this cage summed to 18. It now can't have a 7 on it. But we can do a little better. We have 8s blocked out from here. So, 8 is somewhere here. We also have 8 blocked out from there. So, 8 is in the cage for sure. 8 being in the cage and 7 not being in the cage tells us this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 8. You know, we already know 8 was locked out of those spots. We also can have a 4 there. That leaves us with 5, 6, 9 left over for these 3 cells. Which means these other single cell things in the puzzle cannot be 5, 6, or 9. So it might be worth pencil marking these, even though it might seem a little overkill at first. So what sums do we have left? We have 8 used up here. We have 7 used up, but we haven't used any other of the single cell sums yet. Well, we do have 5, 6, 9, that can't be. So I'm going to first just type in all the numbers 1 through 9. We've already used up 8, we've already used up 7, we've used up 5, 6, 9 as well. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4 in these 4 different cells. That can't be 4, so this is now 1, 2, 3 to mirror that. And then these are 1, 2, 3, 4 to mirror those two. However, this can't be 3 because we have a pair here. Or neither of them can be 3, rather. Is that all we can do? I think that's about all we can do with that for now. We can copy this 5, 6, 9 over here. This box in general is missing 4 cells over here, and that's 1, 2, 4, 6. So we know there's a 6 here. Means 6 is not there. So 6 is one of those. Just trying to think where to look next exactly. Because I know what the next hint involves. I'm just seeing if there's anything else first. I think that's... yeah. Let's go to hint 4. So hint 4 says, pay special attention to the 2-cell sum line segment in box 6. There's a digit that must appear on it that will tell you what that line sum must be. So this is something you definitely could have spotted while you were doing classic Sudoku catch-up stuff now, but that's referring to this segment here. So we have 7 in the center, blocked out from here. Then we have a 7-9 pair, meaning 7's blocked out from there, and 7 can't go in this cage. So 7 must be on this line. Now, it doesn't matter what we add to that. This line could never sum to 5 anymore now. So that is a 9. That becomes 8, 9 there. That becomes 8 here. 9 comes out from there. So this is a 5, 6 pair, so now this is 3 and 5. And so we know there's a 7 on here, and knowing that the sum is 9, that must be 2, 7 exactly. Meaning 2 comes out from these lines here. So now this is 1, 4. We've used up 1 and 4 on this. So 1 comes out from here, and 1 and 4 come out from there. This gives a 2, 3 pair in the row, so that can't be 2 anymore. This is now 1, 4, so that's not 1, 4. That becomes 2, 6, so 2 comes out from here. This is, oddly enough, a 1, 2, 3, 4 quadruple here. So we've used up 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 7, 8, 9. So that's 5, 6. This is 2, 7, so that's not a 2. That's 3, that's 3, that's 2. 3 is out from here, so 3 goes there in this box. This is no longer 9. We know this is summing to 9, so this is either 1 and 8, which it's not. 2 and 7, which it's not. 3 and 6 it could be. 4 and 5 it could be. Just checking on the hints. I think that's all we have for hints until sort of the last step of the puzzle, so let's keep going through with this. This is 1, 4, so this is not a 4. That's not a 5 by extension. Let's maybe look at this column, because we have 7, 9, we have 3, 8, and we have a 1, 2, 4 triple. So this leaves 5 and 6 down here. Let's look at this line. We have a couple options for it. If this was 5, this would have to be either 1 and 4, which it can't be, or 2 and 3, which it also can't be because we have a 3 in the column. So that tells us this is not 5. That must be 6. Those are double 5. That's not 5. That's not 4. So this does a couple things. We'll come back to this line in a second. This is 3, 6, so that's not a 6 anymore. This is now 9 and 5 in that order. I think that's all we can do with that. So let's go back to the line now. Now we know this is either 1, 5, which is not, or 2, 4 to sum to 6. So it is 2, 4. That makes that a 1. That's a 2. That's a 4. We now know these lines. That's double 1. That's double 4. That's now 2. That's now 4. That's 2. That gives us the rest of this line worked out. That's 4 and 2. What are we missing here? 3 and 9, it looks like. Cursor's in the way. So this box, we need, let's see, 1 and 4. This column, we have 3, 6 used up. We need a 1 somewhere, so that's 1. Need a 4. This is 6 lines. This is either 1, 5, which it's not, or 2, 4. So it definitely is 2, 4. So 4 is not in the corner. That's a 1. That's 4 up here. This cage is 7, 8, 9. That's just what's left in the box. We will talk about the ambiguous cages in a moment once we do some more in Classic. This column is missing a 3, not a 3. What is it? I blind? 6, that's what it was. This is now missing 1 and 5. This quadruple here is 1, 3, 6, 8. 3 is not in any of those, so 3 is there. 6 is not in those, so 6 is here. This little quadruple is 5, 7, 8, 9. What else are we looking at? This is to finish off this triple, because we have a 1, 2, 4, 7, 8. This is 3, 5, 6, and we can't have 6 from this. So 6 goes here, 5 goes there. This triple here is now 1, 2, 8. So that's 8. That's 2 and 1. 6, 2. 8 comes out there. 3 and 6 up here. 3 and 5 there. 5 comes out from there. And 8 comes out from there. I believe that is as far as you can get now until you do this final disambiguation step. And so, the hint 5 is basically just addressing, kind of nudging you towards what to think about here. It might be kind of obvious because there's a portion of the grid that we haven't even thought about at all yet, so it might be kind of obvious to think about it, but anyways, hint 5 says, the final disambiguation step requires 2 things. First, you must have classic Sudoku worked out enough to know what row 7 column 2 is, which we just did, so this being 8 is important. Second, you need to factor in the sums of the non-totaled cages in boxes 3 and 9. Combine it all together, and you'll be done. Looks like I made a typo in the hint. I did a single L in the all there, so I'll fix that after. Being pedantic over my own typing. So, this being 8 is not immediately obvious why that's helpful. It's just from a classic Sudoku standpoint. The stuff we're about to do in these cages would leave 8 and one other number here, so this being 8 resolves that. So the important part is we have cages over here. So let's go back to the calculator here and see. So this is 1, 3, 4, 6, 8. So we have a lot of options already auto worked out here, but let's see which one had a 1 and an 8. So this is summing to 22. That's what we get out of this. And this is summing to 24, because that's just what 7, 8, 9 is together. So this is 24, this is 22, so this now cannot sum to either of those. So it was what, 20, 24, and 22, my memory's terrible. 24, 22. Now we only have 5, 7, 8, 9 as the options, so if we try to think about the minimum 5, 7, 8, that would give you 20. So this is not going to be anything below 20. In fact, as soon as you think about that, you now see that it has to be 20, just because that's the only option we have available. There's no way to make this sum to 21 using those digits. If we just kind of unexpand the list there, you can see to have 21, you would need to have a 4, a 6, or 5, 7, and 9 combined with it. Oh wait, maybe it could be 5, 7, 9. Why was that ruled out? Yeah, it could be 5, 7, 9. Oh, well, it can't be by Sudoku. I'm just curious about why that worked that way in the calculator, because I don't recall blocking that out. Yeah, that was, I guess, a typo there on my part. Because now these are 22, 24, so it could be either of those. However, if you now think about, again, the makeup of the digits here, we only have 5, 7, 8, and 9. You can't have this be 7, 8, 9, because you'd end up repeating this cage total here. So this has to have a 5 in it, is kind of the conclusion there. So the 5 must go there. That's now not a 5. Now 1 and 5 work out there. This is going to undo some of this classic Sudoku. That's not 7, that's 9 and 8, 2, 4, 2, 7, 3, 9, 6, 3, 7, 6, 8 there. And now this was why having 8 ruled out here was important, because now we end up with a 7, 9 pair. 8 must go here. And now we have our final thinking step here is to think about, well, it couldn't be 22, couldn't be 24. So if we had 8 and 5, that gives us 13. We can't have a 9 there, because then that brings us to 22. So this has to be 7. And that solves the puzzle. Oh, like I said, sorry that sum is taken. Obviously, you can get the reference for that now. But, the uniqueness thing, we've kind of ruled out all the options for stuff. But yeah, like I said, this is probably my favorite puzzle. I think it's the most fun to solve, for sure, at the very least. And also just really proud of just the fact that I had the idea and came up with it and thought it through. Yeah, thank you for watching.